So it seems I'm finally providing evidence that I'm fulfilling a promise I made to a number of you, well, actually all of you to be specific, a long while ago in terms of bands I would get to in regards to music-focused coverage on this channel. Amaranth was one I told you was coming. On a variety of regards, and I forget some of them, the most recent being The Dark Side of the Moon when I covered them. And that made sense, because again, if you're not familiar with The Dark Side of the Moon, they're a relatively new emergence, but they're a supergroup, of course, very well-known names and well-regarded, especially on this channel, too, and some of which I'm still inquiring on in terms of later releases. I'm still making my way through, but I've gotten a good baseline thus far for the talents of Ad Infinitum and Feuerschwangs. 3 of the members of The Dark Side of the Moon come from those groups. But there's a third entity as well with Amaranth, and that is through the percussionist Morten Loh Sorensen, who does a great job there, and I can't wait to hear more of his work in connection to Amaranth in a up-to-date level. And I qualify that because I have to correct the record on this, and I don't remember when I said this. I noted that I would be making this revised statement with The Dark Side of the Moon, because if you'll forgive me, sometimes I confuse this, and I've forgotten things over time. The thesis of this channel is governed around first impression listens, especially when it concerns music. You know, for me, I've said many times, music for me is it's a wonderful asset in terms of fellowship in the arts world, which isn't always the case, you know. Sometimes it can be, but music always offers that, especially upon providing accounts of first impressions in a way that maybe someone argues a bit unorthodox. I know I'm talking to a screen with the promise that someone's watching it from behind, right? And while it's not necessarily we're enjoying tracks together in the flesh, it's the best I can provide. I guess on maybe a geographical worldwide scale, especially in regards to European talents. And many of you know how much I love that scene. But music for me, generally speaking, is such a first love in my life. And to add this fellowship quality makes it such a craved experience in my world. So I love humoring first impression listens, which again, like I said, has been the thesis of this channel and the mainstay among European groups, with certain exception going in. Most of the European artists I've entertained on this channel through for the metal and rock regards are either based on names I stumble upon, names that are networked on part of other groups, maybe through collaborative works. That's a popular go-to for me to source new artists, or for many of your recommendations. And Amaranth, some of you have supplied that name. Of course, a number of you saw the regard for The Dark Side of the Moon as well. I'd planned to cover them. But I have to revise my statements in that they don't fit the mold of some of the other European talents because I've already familiarized to them. But I forgot about it. Because I went in, this is a number of years ago, before I brought European music specifically in such a grand dominance here, in focus of music coverage. And I didn't go into it, on a completely fresh note of like, oh, I'm all, what's the expression? Something to do with turkeys. I forget it. Anyway, a cold turkey. I knew a couple bands. Let's say, for example, Apocalyptica, Blackbriar, Snow White Blood, Dead by April, Bullet for My Valentine. Those are a couple names that have been known to me for a number of years. Amaranth was 2, but I forgot about it because I didn't regard their name at the time, and I just heard at least one of their tracks at that season. Because at the time that I was venturing around in terms of new music, before I brought music coverage on here, I typed in, I remember this distinctly, I remember going on YouTube and typing in European rock music to see who would pop up, because I wanted to broaden out. And Amaranth was the suggestion, and it didn't hit me until I was gathering, or playing out what selection of tracks to spotlight on this channel, because I sift through, as I expressed in the past, with certain exception, I try to be very democratic in regards to the artists I consult, to be fair to everybody, especially on the regards of new talent attribution. And I might actually enhance the count of Amaranth. Currently, I only have about 4 songs of theirs lined up to spotlight. I might take a look at the last album and pick out a selection. We'll see. I can't do all of them, and I'll qualify why in a minute. Because in determining the selection of tracks, I realized, going through what I was picking, that I had heard them before, through 365. Though I forgot about the name Amaranth was familiar to me in discussion, and also part based on your recommendations. The thumbnail, immediately I recognized I've heard this one before, and I can say now, It's an exquisite piece, especially on humoring their members on other ventures, not only on repeat listens. And at this point, I have expanded to some of the past tracks I've heard from them, including, I forget one of them, but as I said with Exodus's Consideration, I can't cover every track because at this point I have heard the 82nd all the way, and I love that. I love that cover. It's a wonderful piece. I've watched the video too, so that wouldn't be a fresh take. It's wonderful. I encourage it. It's a great song. As well as GG6. I've heard that one. I think there's another one I'm mixing up, and I'll superimpose and post whatever it was. But at the time, like I said, I didn't revere them quite enough. But now that I've extended at least some familiarity with some of their members, and what really brings me in, not just on Morten Lo Sorensen's regard, but as well, Niels Johan Malin. Some of you might remember when I covered Ad Infinitum, he was a collaborative presence on part of Chapter 2 Monarchy for the Afterlife track. I still love that one. It's one of my favorites of their lineup. And if you've not heard Ad Infinitum before, I highly recommend them. Niels Johan Malin really impressed me on his vocal capabilities. Like, his styling and the energy was like such classic rock star to me, especially with the hair. But his personality, I loved hearing it. And so when I went back and re-listened to 365, because it was post Afterlife, I did this. I was so charmed again. I'm like, I got a fast track Amaranth. So I'm here today with at least a maybe to be expanded selection. We'll see. No promises, but it's an idea I have in mind. Starting with presently, and again, if that will be the case, I'll roll back. But we're going to start at least with more recent tunes, including PvP. And Niels Johan Malin's in the thumbnail, so I can't wait. I'm really excited for this one. Man, I've been waiting to hear Amaranth for a little while now. I'm sure many of you have been eagerly anticipating, and now I'm fulfilling my promise, as I said. And maybe you're somebody that hasn't approached Amaranth before. Maybe you've heard the name. I know, again, they get circulated pretty well. I've certainly heard one of them even before I first covered them, or even, I think, entertained 365 on that initial listen all of those many moons ago. I think you'll enjoy the experience. I think we're going to have a fun time together on this one. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the song and the video that corresponds as well. And if you're not familiar with the way I format my coverage here, perhaps my work is new to you, I do try to accommodate listener taste to the best extent I can. So if you're someone that likes to read along with the narrative of the piece, the lyrics will be provided to you in the video. And as soon as the track commences, in a second, you will see the lyrics pop up for yourself and then navigate again along with the song in synchronicity. All right, Amaranth. Finally, we're getting to them. The last entity off the Dark Side of the Moon to be covered on this channel, in respect as well, the Foyer Schwangs is still ongoing. I'm still making my way through them. Anyway, now I'm catching up, or at least starting to catch up with Amaranth. Here we go, PvP. And we've now broadened out with another example by the Swedish metal territory. And there's a lot of names there that are really cool. I'm sure Amaranth, well, of course Amaranth's gonna be no exception. I already know a couple of their tracks. I like the pop opener. It's very game-like in energy. It's really funny, actually. Oh, really interesting key change. Quite swift. Not what I expected from them. They're creative. Oh, man. Great change up here. Structured beautifully. Oh, wow. Satisfactory as always. And the creativeness of this piece and pacing just really lands. And that growl and the pacing of it is just wicked, especially mixed with Neil's presence. Isn't his range just beautiful? That inflection point on the end just works so well. I love thrash metal. Perfect in presence. I love that electronic flair. It gives it such an incredible dimension for me. Man, that's solid, especially on the vocal integration. It's a great mix. I will say, it's so funny the way it initiates. Now I get it. With the PvP regard, I guess that makes sense too in the titling. You know, it is a pity. For understandable circumstances, I have read up on their history at least a bit, or recent history, that Enrique, is that how you pronounce the name? The unclean vocalist. Love him and his voice. Oh, man, it's just so entertaining to engage with him, especially on the faster pace side. Almost like rap-esque. I've never been like a big rap guy. Mixing that in terms of metal scream, it's like, yes, I'm going for it. He's no longer with the group. He's since left, like I said, understandable circumstances. It's kind of sad, though, because he was such a wonderful presence here. And mixed with Elise and Nils, isn't that just the perfect pairing in terms of the trio? Like, that blend, just, well, especially on Elise and Nils, the vocal inflections toward the beginning of those chorus sections, well, used twice, really fixate your attention, in my opinion. That piece is great drive. And it has, again, in the beginning, like I said, it's intentionally, I guess, stayed like a video game. It has a nice pop flair. And, you know, pop music hasn't always appealed to me, but mixed with metal, and especially in the European regard, I find a charming tone that's gelling quite well. So this piece easily lands on energy, especially with the electronic vibe. That's like I've said many times, is it just me that finds this real mainstay within Swedish music specifically? Like, all these artists have electronic tones to their work. It's so funny to see that overlap. Again, I don't know if that's meant to be like some sort of Swedish metal culture highlight. But like Dead by April, Fall of a Cypher, Anima Veil, all in that existent regard, they're all similar in that vein, different extents and personalities, but it's just really funny to see that common trait shared. But I think PvP is a real fun engagement. You know, I think and again, I don't have the most extensive understanding of the library of Amaranth currently. I've perused a couple of older tracks, but what I've heard I've liked a lot. PvP has a great tone to it that does feel maybe an electronic emphasis, closest to 82nd. Well, no, I'd say closest. It must be more of a mainstay presence of them again from my early introduction. Because 365, GG6, and 82nd all the way have that overlap. They all have an electronic basis to them, or at least not basis, but integration to their works. With the harsher side, that easily appeals for me. Thrash metal, anything agitated, I'm like, yes, gimme. Though I keep an open door, of course, to broad ranges of styles, especially in the metal scene, because you can have great talent, you know, abroad. You just have to be open to it, as far as I'm concerned. And I've had a great time. There's not been a track on this channel that I've humored at this point that I've not liked. I've loved everything I've heard. And Amaranth, no exception. PvP, creatively speaking, especially on that vocal integration, that for me is the signature. Along with Enrique's presence, I love hearing him scream. It's just, and just the pacing of that was effective. It's a wonderful highlight, in my opinion. Great piece to humor, great crowd engager as well. I mean, on energy, I could see this doing very well if it hasn't already on tours. Like, it just lands. It's a wonderful piece to engage with. And it's perhaps as well in the fellowship regard, right? Some of you I know may be approaching this on a mixed, everybody might be approaching this on a mixed regard, in that some of you might be established Amaranth fans. I'm sure you're very elated that I'm finally getting to them in coverage. Again, I promised you, and I keep my word, as far as I'm concerned. And And maybe some of you are newcomers, but you haven't entertained them before. I'd love to hear your perspective down below, whatever you wish to disclose in that, as well as, like I said, your angle and your thoughts on the song. Generally speaking, I think it's, in my opinion, from what I've heard, and again, I'm a bit more limited in my days, to evolve, of course. Maybe even beyond what I have currently planned. It's one of my favorites from them, I think, especially on that vocal side. Just the drive on it, the basis, and the fun factor. I mean, it's a great performance video as well. Fun palette, great introduction to have with all of you. Now that I'm finally covering Amaranth, the missing piece of the Dark Side of the Moon thus far on this channel in terms of basis presences, but everything for that piece lands. And in regards to Morton's percussion work, as always, great basis to the piece. It's very strong as well. Everything here just clicks. The riff structure, the emphasis, the tone. It's just those vocals that really take me away. I love that. And that's a strong asset to many European groups, to be fair. So there's many people in competition to one another, but Amaranth, has a signature presence in that regard. I'm definitely delighted to hear more of their talents going forward. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.